The enemy has started using heavy equipment in the Pokrovsk direction. After capturing Pokrovsk, the enemy began gathering forces in the northern part of the city to launch assaults to the north in the Hryshine area. On the stretch from Dobropilia to Kotlin, if you look at the map, there are 3 armies operating simultaneously. The 51st, the 2nd Combined Arms Army, and the 41st. So what do we have? The gray zone is beyond Pokrovsk. The city itself is already in the red zone. Unfortunately, the guys held out until the very end. This Pokrovsk-Mirnorad operation inflicted enormous losses on the enemy and held them back from further active actions for a certain period, in particular from redeploying, for example, the same forces that are now engaged near Pokrovsk to the area of Kostiantynivka. So, the enemy with the forces of the 51st Combined Arms Army is trying to break through from the east and south to the closer defensive lines. Now, looking at Dobropilia, if you take a close look at the map, this is, of course, the specific area of Kutuzivka and Novye Donbas. This is the exact area regarding the enemy's intentions where the enemy is now actively directing its main attacks. And we also see pressure near Krasnopodilia, Svitlo, and the village of Vodyanske. The directions of the attacks by the 51st Combined Arms Army. Another group of troops, units of the 2nd Combined Arms Army, with support from elements of the 41st Combined Arms Army, are now trying to push into Hryshchina and break through to the center of the settlement in order to advance further to Nova, Oleksandrivka and Myron, moving towards Sheliki and Yuriivka along the highway. Regarding the Pokrovsk-Pavlohrad sector and returning specifically to the area of Dobropilia, we must emphasize that the enemy forces are also steadily advancing. They are currently attempting to push further into Sofivka along the main highway. That leads directly toward Novopavlivske in the general direction of Drushkivka. Here, enemy marine units are involved. The 801st. Right here, the opposing enemy forces are also trying to move along this strategic road, effectively attempting to bypass this currently contested gray zone. And part of Kushevi Yar, which our fighters are successfully holding. The enemy forces have also concentrated their efforts in the Biletske area. By taking a closer look at the map, it becomes clear that the directions of the attack on Biletske are once more elements of various units. The 51st Combined Arms Army is currently engaged. The enemy is actively pushing through the settlement area. In Nekanurivka, both to the north and to the south, the enemy forces, also heavily concentrated near Rodenske, are directing their attacks toward Biletske as well. But what is particularly interesting is that right now, the enemy is simultaneously using specialized assault units from Rodenske, specifically these same unit elements. From the 51st Combined Arms Army, the enemy is sending units from Rodenske toward Hryshyn and in the direction of Shevchenko. That is from the Rivne-Svitli line, as we can see from this line. The enemy is now deploying its units. The current situation remains quite difficult in the direction of Hryshyn, but it is under control. The enemy, with forces from the 2nd Combined Arms Army, and more specifically the 27th Motorized Rifle Division, is actively attempting to break through to Novoaleksandrivka and Vasilivka. In particular, recently deployed defensive equipment was used in this area, about which our military issued several official statements. However, the enemy was ultimately unable to encircle Hryshyn, so all the military equipment was destroyed. The enemy entered the southern outskirts of Hryshyn and is trying to establish a foothold there. According to military observer Kostiantin Mashovets, because of the ability to concentrate infantry in the northern part of Pokrovsk, the Russian command of the 2nd Combined Arms Army is constantly sending in fresh forces. In the direction of Pokrovsk, Shevchenko and Pokrovsk Rodine. Here we can see the directions of these attacks. There are available military reserves and there are opportunities to transfer additional fresh reinforcements from the city. If we look at the entire southern sector of Pokrovsk, we can see that the enemy is also trying to carry out highly active and aggressive offensive operations in the area of Kotlin and in the area of Udakhne. In particular, from Udakhne along this axis toward Serhivka, the enemy is trying as much as possible to further cut the road. And also in the direction of the attack from Kotlin, there is also a push toward the road E50, Pokrovsk-Pavlohrad. Looking at the rapid pace of movement and the strategic objectives of the enemy's summer offensive, they will likely try to eliminate this Dobropilya salient, fully encircle the city, and effectively cut the main road. Dobropilya, Kramatorsk. This is very important right now. Now, if you take a very close look at the map right here, you can clearly see that this particular road runs along a winding path that looks almost exactly like this one. That is why the enemy will now throw all available forces, those freed up from this Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad operation, into this area, into these sectors, in order to prepare the groundwork for this spring-summer offensive operation. We can learn more about the situation in the Pokrovsk direction directly from the head of the communications department of the 7th Air Assault Corps, Volodymyr Polivier. Greetings to you.
Wishing you good health, Ruslan.
Let me remind our viewers. There is also a QR code on your screens where the riders are raising funds for unmanned systems. That's why every hryvnia from our viewers is very important. Join in, because this is about the lives of those who keep the sky above us safe. So, returning to the situation in the Pokrovsk sector, what do we have? Is it true that the enemy is now using Pokrovsk as a major logistical hub for amassing equipment and manpower? That is both houses and basements. Obviously, they have nowhere else to store equipment, people, and so on. Please. This is
only partially true information. Why? This is primarily because our forces continue to maintain the entrances and roads leading into Pokrovsk under strict fire control. Consequently, there is absolutely no free movement for them in that area. The enemy forces attempt to slip through our lines by taking advantage of bad weather conditions, or they move in small, dispersed infantry groups. But as for this infantry and the heavy equipment that managed to slip into the city, it becomes significantly easier for them to hide and conceal themselves within the dense urban areas. The enemy takes advantage of this and essentially uses Pokrovsk and its buildings in order to have the opportunity to amass their forces, which are then moved further north or towards Hryshine. And
tell me, based on the reports, has the enemy actually managed to gain a foothold on the southern outskirts of Hryshine? Have they successfully entrenched themselves there? And what kind of threat does this pose to our positions?
To answer this question, we need to start with what is currently the main strike force, the primary means of attack. These are FPV drones. And accordingly, if the enemy manages to bring in, or if we manage to successfully deploy and position groups of pilots to certain key positions, then we can say that we have established ourselves there simply because we have brought them in. This is the primary method of conducting an offensive. The enemy has not yet brought in their pilots or their FPV drones, which are their main means of attack into the settlement of Hryshine. In a certain way, they cling to the southern outskirts of this settlement, bring in infantry there, and they hide in the basements. Basically, no defensive lines are being set up there. They are simply hiding. Accordingly, the task of the units of the 7th Corps, the 155th Brigade, which is holding the defense there, is to identify these points and destroy them. And we are methodically doing this. Well, the only thing is, of course, that the Russians have the advantage in manpower. So sometimes they bring in fresh infantry faster than we can grind them down and destroy them, particularly in the area of Vorishkina.
Volodymyr, please tell us, is the enemy pressing? Are they now attacking more with small groups, or are there already more assaults supported by equipment, considering the weather? Or let's say, has the total number of these assaults actually increased over time?
The weather conditions are currently quite favorable across the Eastern Front, especially in the Donetsk region. This clarity facilitates effective FPV drone strikes and supports the continuous aerial reconnaissance efforts conducted by both sides. In other words, all means of destruction are in use. An object can be detected, recorded, hit with artillery, targeted with strike drones, or, for example, engaged with tactical weapons. And all these factors work against the use of heavy armored vehicles. In other words, the specific conditions necessary for carrying out any mechanized assaults have not been created yet. Our defense here is quite strong and very well prepared. We have a large number of skilled pilots, we maintain full control over the battlefield, and the enemy simply does not have the opportunity to use their equipment in any organized way. In formations, in ranks, That's why they continue to advance in small infantry groups, continuing to use this tactic of probing and pushing, looking for opportunities to get infantry in.
So how often does the enemy use KBs now? We know that thanks to the KBs, they managed to advance by destroying our positions, leveling them completely, and let's say creating such conditions that we are forced to pull back and take up other defensive lines.
Over the past few months, approximately 25% of all KAP strikes have been carried out specifically in the Pokrovsk direction. Currently, the overall intensity of these KAP strikes has decreased to a certain extent. And this is quite probably related to our ongoing active counteroffensive or offensive actions taking place in the Oleksandrivka and Huliaipol directions. And accordingly, the enemy is forced to redeploy and concentrate the actions of its tactical aviation right there. Tactical aviation is very maneuverable, mobile, and not limited to any particular section of the front. That is, literally in one day from airfield somewhere, let's say in the Kursk region, the same aircraft can strike targets both in Pokrovsk, in the Pokrovsk direction, as well as in the Kupiansk direction, or be directed toward Oleksandrivsk. And in principle, the total number of KAB strikes is, to a very large extent, a clear indicator of exactly where the main effort is currently concentrated. That is, either where the enemy is desperately trying to stop our troops, or where he is systematically softening up and thinning out our defenses.
To summarize your points, considering the enemy's movements and the reserve deployments everyone is talking about, where exactly do you expect the fighting to intensify? In the direction of Dobropilia, along the Pavlograd highway in the direction of Pavlograd?
It is my belief that the primary military-political goal of this summer campaign remains completely unchanged. This is a topic that everyone is currently discussing. The ultimate objective is to fully capture the entire Donetsk region within its administrative borders, and the enemy will try to achieve this by any means necessary. And for this, they will try to break through our defenses via Dobropilia and then towards Izium in order to outflank our Kramatorsk-Sloviansk positions. Yeah, Marat.
Yes, thanks for joining us. Now, news from the Pokrovsk direction, communications head of the 7th Air Assault Corps, Volodymyr Polevii. Let me remind you that the paratroopers are collecting donations for the guys for a drone system. There's a QR code on the screens. Join in. Dmitro, please tell us, did the enemy free up additional forces that took part in the assaults on Pokrovsk and Mirnorad? Is that enough for the enemy to maintain this intense pace of advance, so to speak, and, for example, to press on further? For example, towards Kostiantynivka or Kramatorsk?
As of now, no. That's why the Russians understand this perfectly and are trying to amass at least 100,000 personnel to create so-called strategic reserves. Indeed, they are once again setting unrealistic goals, as the representative of the presidential office Pavlopoulos mentioned, in order to resolve all this within a year. But judging by the pace at which the enemy is advancing, it will take them at least a year and a half. But the point is that yes, the enemy has freed up forces, but so have we as well. And the concentration of troops. In this Ukrainian agglomeration, it has dropped by about 3 times, and we are also trying to carry out rotations. The 7th Air Assault Corps has done simply incredible work here. They did everything they could, and even what they couldn't. And here it will depend on where they manage to push through more. That is, either here and try to move toward Dobropilia to take our positions. Because they really are there, or accordingly move using the so-called small pincers tactic and try to break through specifically toward Drushkivka. Most likely they will do this in 2 waves. First, the Drushkivka-Kostiantynivka agglomeration, and then Sloviansk-Kramatorsk. But for this, once again, they need to amass very, very significant forces. What officers of the general staff are saying is that the main focus could also shift purely to Kostiantynivka if they succeed. To infiltrate the city further, because they have managed to get a foothold just barely in the area near the auto service station, which is located in the southeastern part. So here, the enemy will move according to where they manage to break through. Wherever they succeed in pushing, that's where they will apply pressure. But getting right as close as possible to our fortress line is his primary objective for today.
In the southern sector of the front near Zaporizhzhia, Russian occupiers are transferring reserves, including marine and airborne units, likely from the area near Pokrovsk. Our intelligence is already observing activity in the Orikhiv direction, both in Orikhiv itself and at the positions of Ukrainian defenders around this city. The enemy is intensively attacking with guided aerial bombs and drones, including the Molniya UAV. The occupiers are using these strike drones by the hundreds every day. About their efforts and methods of combating drones, the commander of the drone interceptor unit of the 118th Separate Mechanized Brigade, Vyacheslav, call sign Boroda, spoke on the United News Marathon broadcast. According to him, the enemy is indeed actively concentrating manpower on the line of contact for further offensives, trying to infiltrate in small groups. Our defenders detect and destroy them. The enemy is also using a large number of Molniya drones during the day in this direction. Most of the drones are detected and destroyed by the unit, even though it is relatively young. And right during a live broadcast on the National Marathon, the guys shot down another Molniya, and for them, that's just routine. However, there is a significant shortage of specialized devices for detecting incoming drones, so electronic intelligence equipment is highly necessary for defense.
Based on the latest statistical data, roughly around 100 Molniya drones are launched by the enemy on a daily basis in this direction. And we successfully detect and destroy most of them. But considering the above, we have quite limited resources and capabilities for detection, as well as a limited number of available personnel, strike assets, and electronic warfare equipment.
And our defenders have already learned how to destroy even the newest Russian developments. A hostile clean drone equipped with artificial intelligence was shot down by the air defense unit of the 82nd Air Assault Brigade in the skies over Zaporizhzhia. This drone had previously been a rarity in Ukrainian airspace. The defense forces say that the occupiers continue to upgrade their drones because whoever possesses the most advanced technologies for controlling the skies will have greater control over territory on the ground. TSN special correspondent Yulia Karyenko recently visited the frontline positions of the so-called small air defense and saw how Ukrainian soldiers operating interceptor drones are even shooting down Shaheds. Watch her frontline report right now.
What's the distance between them?
It's about 3.5 kilometers away.
This is the pilot with the call sign Teacher, beginning the hunt for a Russian drone that took off over the paratroopers' positions in the Alexandrivka direction.
It's flying really quite well.
For a month now, Defense Force assault operations have been successfully underway here. The air assault forces have already liberated 9 villages, though Russians are resisting and launching supercam drones to scout and hinder the advance.
Echo visual. Currently targeting object 1183.
Teacher is approaching the target. Just a second later, and the Russians are no longer able to see the front line. From a bird's eye view,
we engage the supercam at 1183. Here we can see its altitude. It's constantly dropping. That means it was shot down.
This is the position of the drone interceptor pilots who shoot down all types of Russian UAVs. They are also called the Small Air Defense.
This will be the special 10th anniversary flight.
The equipment they use complements the entire air defense system of Ukraine. This drone, which the soldier is now preparing for launch, is called Lightning because of its incredible speed, as it can catch up with even a jet-powered Shahed in the sky.
Something big is coming from the north. Now get ready.
These interceptor drones are also called anti-aircraft drones. These are the very new technologies, and the only ones in the world that can effectively and cheaply counter Russian Shaheds. In the first years of the full-scale invasion, enemy attack drones were attempted to be shot down with anti-aircraft missiles or cannons. Now Ukrainian developers have invented interceptor drones and are producing them by the thousands every day. And they are used not only against Shaheds, but also against the Russians' bigger brothers, the so-called winged scout drones. Although Ukraine has plenty of these means, there still aren't that many trained pilots.
We don't have as many crews as we have equipment. There is always a need for pilots. It is significantly easier to train a technician, much easier to train a specialist, but it is considerably harder to train a pilot. There are enough means to shoot down targets and work absolutely non-stop 24 hours a day.
The crew of Teacher is one of the most effective in their work. In the past month, they have shot down 130 Russian drones. But the greatest achievement for the soldiers is shooting down the Russian drone called Klin with artificial intelligence.
Here are its elevator controls. And if you examine publicly available media sources, you can see that this model is the Klin UAV.
This Klin drone is a new development of the Russian military-industrial complex, which the occupiers presented only last fall. Its cost is $35,000. The occupiers developed this drone to counter our Sea Baby naval drones, but instead they launched it into the sky over the front line.
This is actually our second successful shoot down of it in Ukraine. In general, it was officially marketed and positioned as a strategic countermeasure against our BICs. But what it's doing in the Zaporizhzhia region is unclear.
The defense forces have a special program that allows you to track the movement of enemy air forces in real time. And just imagine right now the beautifully vibrant sky is perfectly clear. It's just an unusual picture for this program. Naturally, of course, I can't show it to you because that's for strict operational security reasons. Such calm is rare and only applies to large drones, the soldiers say. Enemy FPVs are constantly on the hunt regardless of the weather or the time of day. They are only shot down with small arms closer to the front line. And these drone confrontations between the Ukrainian military and the enemy now surpass the number of direct battles between soldiers. And whoever has more resources and modern technologies in the sky will control more territory on the ground. Yulia Karyenko, Alexandra Shayan, Ole Mostovi, TSN 1+1, United News Marathon.